conversations that stick, conversations that stand out, conversations that
Yeah.
actually make impact. Like that is the power of design. And that's where we shift. If we're talking about group coaching and team coaching, there are layers of facilitation, but this is really like what's happening now, what's needed to be explored today in this moment, in this context of what's being said, whether it's being said explicitly or implicitly. And I'm going to take us, if you don't mind, I'm going to take us into the superpowers. This is
Yeah.
where, the presence, but those 5 superpowers, we did 5 episodes. We've done groupings of them in season 1, but starting on episode 44 right through to 48, we cover
Mhm.
each of the 5 superpowers.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Britton, and welcome to the CoachingMany podcast. I've been on a mission for the last 20 years to expand the coaching conversation to many. Along with my co-host, Evana, we're going to be exploring coaching as it relates to conversations, connection, and change in both personal and professional settings. CoachingMany is about creating empowering and thought-provoking spaces for conversation which strengthen relationships and enhance results. Throughout the CoachingMany podcast, we'll share tools, practices, and approaches to support you in your conversations, one dialogue at a time. I can't believe that we've made it to looking back at season 2. So welcome back, Evana. I'm excited to take a look back at all of the episodes that we've done in this last year as we go to wrap up season 2 here at the CoachingMany podcast. I'm curious, what stands out for you as you think about the last episodes over the last year, spring of 2025 to spring of 2026?
Yeah, just the evolution and growth, even as I scan the episodes, how they've evolved, and yet there's some core nuggets that kind of keep those anchors for us as coaches, leaders. That's what I'm noticing is like thinking back last spring to this spring, a lot has changed in the world. A lot has changed in how we do group coaching, team coaching, but not because of the actual team coaching, group coaching, but in terms of who's in our conversations and what's needed, what they're looking for, what they need, what they want, and how we can best support them. And I think this season has done a real beautiful job of touching on some of the key big rocks or nuggets to support coaches and leaders in this evolution over the last year.
Yeah, I think, as we look at the changing landscape and the future of work, this is definitely, where my writing is taking me. We've seen
Mhm.
seismic shifts over the last 12 months.
Yeah.
And, it's not only been context, but it also has been the way we work and the tools that we have available. So there are counterpoints, right? One of the themes that I think we've been really looking at here is just the counterpoints. So what remains the same? What changes? How do we deepen practices? How do we deepen impact? How do we continue to pivot with our business approaches and frameworks? So it's really, I'm looking forward to this. And it's interesting.
Mhm.
You and I sat down before we started recording, and very much there's about 6 buckets that we're going to look at today in terms of where did our episodes fall. We have tools and practices. We spent a lot of time looking at one area of really presence. How are we showing up in this changing world? And with the changes, what are those changes? What are clients asking for today in an AI-enabled landscape?
Mhm.
I'm excited to look at that because it's been a year now almost since we launched the AI-empowered coach and booster days, which have been really popular in terms of supporting coaches to explore AI in a way around their business. So there is a business component and, of course, a design component. How do we continue to create engaging experiences, engaging conversation spaces for people to show up and explore what's important to them? Looking forward to this. What is, where do you think we should start with this whole landscape?
Let's jump in with tools and practices. That's where I think is a good place to start because I know a lot of our coaches, our listeners want tools.
Yes.
Like give us something that we can go and take into our conversations, go into our room. So that's where I think would be a good place to start.
Yeah. Well, I can't think of tools without sort of a framing that people will see in my upcoming writing around tool set, skill set,
Yeah.
mindset. So
Ooh.
tools are an interesting sort of framing in terms of what are the practices? What do we do? How do we do it? And we did quite a few episodes
Yeah.
around tools. I know you've got the list there, but I want to invite listeners to think about what are the things that you're leaning into this year? How has that shifted? Is it shifting? Tools, again, should never replace, and that's a strong should, but they should never replace the entire conversation.
Nope.
Yet they really become a springboard, especially in the landscape of coaching many. One-on-one, it's really, I won't say it's easy, but it is easier to track conversation than in a group
Mhm.
or a team context where we really have people coming, especially in group coaching, people on their different pathways. In team coaching, we're looking for alignment. And really, the notion of tools can be varied. I think we're seeing out in the landscape of coaching growing popularity with things like outdoor coaching, people taking people into nature, which is something
Yeah.
you've been doing for, I think, since you opened your doors. Certainly,
Yeah.
it's something we've been doing for the last 20 years. But we also see our experiential lens as being super important. And it's been neat this year with the Conversation Sparker Experiential
Yes.
Roadshow to move from just like the tactile tools to our visual coaching approaches. And I had a note the other day from someone
Mhm.
saying, Jen, thanks for putting on your Substack this winter a whole series on visual coaching. So if people haven't heard of the
Mhm.
Substack, I don't think I've ever talked about it here, but I
Yeah.
launched this about 6 months ago. And it's a hub for more writing and also resources, some videos. It's over at flowflexscale.substack.com. And I've had fun just putting stuff
Mm.
out there around business, but also I think the changing landscape of coaching as well.
Beautiful. You know, when I hear you say this, yeah, we have episodes, um, 31 that talks about the 5 essential tools, and we also have an
Ooh,
episode, number 30 on be, do, have. But even listening to you speak, Jen, like, in terms of that outdoor, that kinesthetic, that tactile, you to me, your branding around Sparker, like that spark. How can we spark conversation? How
mhm.
can we support people in having options in how to come into a conversation, right?
Yes.
Or like to really have people go deeper. So even outdoor, like I just think about, I do some of my coaching walking. Why? Because I work with executives who don't have a lot of time to be outdoors. And so if they have an hour, we go outside and we walk. Why? Because that is part of the culture in Italy, especially where I live. And so it actually calms the nervous system, right? So it's all these
Yeah.
aspects. So you want to be
Mhm.
thinking about different facets of what are the tools that you can use, and be open to thinking outside of the box. Be open to
Yes.
actually create something. You've got great tools. Even in the work that I do, I'm starting to create more tools to be able
Mhm.
to listening to my clients and what they need and what's activating them to support them in their goals.
Yeah. In their goals in a changing landscape. So I'm going to just
Thank you.
quickly
Yeah.
segue us to we couldn't talk about season 2 without talking to as I said, the seismic shifts that have
Oh.
happened. Think about where AI is today in spring of
Mhm.
2026, right? Most of the teams I work with are AI enabled. I know last night I was at a presentation from Gallup, and really the latest research shows that leaders are 2 to 4 times more sort of ahead of the curve with AI enablement than our team members. So, also
Mhm.
depending on who you're working with, whether it's leaders, whether it's team members, whether it's solopreneurs, which has been a big focus for us through the growth of FlowFlex Scale, really, we can't think about team and group coaching without thinking about the role of AI.
Yeah, and
Uh,
that's a tool.
that's a
Totally.
tool. The guards, the sort of the guardrails to this process. How I think there is the counterpoint of really human flourishing and human connection. And I've talked a lot here in recent months, especially the last 6 to 8
Mhm.
months, around human connection design, how our work here at Potentials Realized is becoming so much richer in creating these experiences for people to leverage and explore the human side of them in an AI enabled world. We're not saying we're not an AI. We're very heavily focused actually on AI and future of work, but we want to really look at the importance of the human in all
Yeah.
of this.
And I think that is, those counterparts that you were saying, right? Like there
Yeah.
is that. And I want to just name, like, even in the last few weeks, I've gone outside of my usual AI app and I've exploring now different ones. I'm using more Gemini. I'm using
Yes.
Perplexity for different things. And so I
Yeah.
think I won't sleep. I often say this, I won't sleep tonight if I don't say this. And this is what I'm going to, then this is it, is regardless of your own personal opinion of AI, and it's valid and you need to honor that, you also need to be thinking about, again, the world of your clients. So if you're working with organizations, if you're working with leaders who are in organizations working with AIs, there is a little bit of like, this is a tool, this is a skill that you need to have some understanding, and maybe that through that discernment you'll discern if you want to be working with organizations who use AI or not. And I think that is a skill, that is a tool, that is a bit of a responsibility. And even ethically, how do we use AI in a way that actually is within our ethics as competencies? And I know that on ICF, at least, there's various calls around the ethics of AI. And I know you've talked about this also. But we can't just keep our heads in the sand. As you said, as we know, looking outside our window, the world is in flux. The world is in flux, and AI is a part of it. And so you need to ask yourself, where are you in that aspect of this? Because I think it's really important. I've been using AI, I've been using ChatGPT for over a year. Well, I think even maybe two. I've lost track, right?
Yeah.
But only in recent weeks and recent months have I actually went, I actually want to see what else is out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as a business, right, we have always, our business has always been virtual and digital.
Yeah.
It's interesting as I look back at one of my writings, which has become really Flow Flex Scale. The original title was Drovepreneur. It was digital, remote, online, virtual. And now it's AI enabled. We are very much as an organization in that leading pack of, well, we are not an AI enabled. We do not create AI. It's about what does the world of work need to look like? And the world of work and the economic conditions are also, we can't step over this, really inviting people to recreate, redefine who they are. And that means more and more focus on entrepreneurship and solopreneurship. I have to say, last week's 5-day business reset challenge that I hosted in lead up to the end of Q1 was really telling in terms of what people were focusing on and what coaches are looking at and where they're placing their attention. Because if we talk to tools and practices, right, some of this landscape is getting shifted because the volume, and I'm going to say it explicitly, the volume of people being coached has changed dramatically, and where people are coming from, and how coaches are getting their work. We talked a lot, and I'll just say it explicitly, right? And a colleague of mine said this during the pandemic. They said, this is the golden age of coaching. I'll say, have we passed the golden age of coaching, right? And a lot of coaches that come to our programming, whether it's for our CCE approved group coaching and team coaching certification pathways, whether they're coming for coaching supervision, whether they're coming for mentor coaching, I think the majority have indicated a significant downturn in the volume of their coaching, especially since the beginning of 2026. So it doesn't mean that the market will always remain there, but I think we need to be very open and very real to speak to the need, as we've seen in other decades, the needs for coaches to be very business savvy in terms of, how are you creating a livelihood for yourself?
And I think that all of that really is being present in the sense of like listening to what our clients are saying, but like we can't have our head in the sand, whether it be about AI, whether it be what's going on in the world and how that's affecting maybe not our industry, but also the industries that we support, and how can we stand out
Yeah.
in that?
Everything is connected, right? And
Everything
we've
is
never called
connected.
ourselves a systemic business, but we are a systemic business grounded in the work of Peter Senge since we opened this business up. And it's also been about accessibility, right? Like, why did I open the doors to Potentials Realized 22, almost 23 years ago, this coming week? It was to create accessibility for people. And, I think if you listen, it's interesting. You're not hearing a lot about accessibility or what the bros started calling democratization. We are creating, in fact, AI is creating a whole new layer of haves and have-nots. And like I sort of named in 2017 with Effective Virtual Conversations, if you look at the back of that book, one of my favorite quotes from Ray Kroc, digital Darwinism is unkind to those who wait. I would assert that AI Darwinism is unkind to those that wait.
Absolutely.
And so what is our role? If you came to group coaching really wanting to make sure that anyone, or what I would say, this is coaching for the masses. Well, the masses are changing quite significantly in the world.
Shifting and
So how
changing.
can coaching and group coaching specifically be a vehicle for people to have a voice, for people to design their futures in a changing world?
Beautiful.
So we've done a lot of episodes. I know we did one that a couple of our current students in the group coaching and team coaching pathway has said that they really enjoyed, and that is setting people up for success. What number is that one? 43 or 46, I think.
Is 43, episode 43, setting up coach and client for success in group and team coaching. Yeah.
A lot of people have really enjoyed that episode. So if you're wanting to go back to the basics, I know you took us into competencies a few minutes ago. Like, we've done quite a few episodes in season 2. What are some other ones that stand out for you, Evana, with
Well, just building off of what we were talking about, like at this day and age, like at this moment in time, like I think we do need to be flexible, like that flex flow scale.
Yeah.
And so what does that look like as it relates to your niche? I know I'm recalibrating, and my recalibration is all about what are the needs now, not what do I think, what are the needs? And that's in the listening. And so it's like part of that, whether it's setting coach and client for success is in the listening, which is competencies, but also, are you open to AI? Are you open to shifting your niche? Are you open to pivoting to something, right? I think that's really what we're speaking about here in these various episodes is that agility.
Is the agility, and which is, flow flex scale, the heart of it. So episode 36, at the end of last summer, I started talking about flow flex scale. We've had 2 cohorts now, 2 quarterly cohorts pretty much go through. And pretty much I say because we're a few days away from the end of Q1, but this programming, right, it's been totally zesty, I think, for people, really taking what was a 1-year process, putting it down into 90 days, because how are we focusing, right? We've done episodes in this last year around neuroscience and group and team coaching. The science is clear in terms of cognitive capability. The science is clear in terms of AI and the impact on cognitive capability, which once again is driving us to be very creative in what are our approaches. So, and how do we design? So there's another bucket in that 6 buckets. We've talked about tools and practices. We've talked about some of the competencies. But there's also a design piece that I know our alumni love the work that we do around design, especially looking at sprints and hacks, as I would call it, something we've offered since 2016, right? This is not just in the last few years, but, since 2016, how are we using design principles, neuroscience and cognitive science principles to ensure that we're designing for the conversations in the moment, as you said, not in the moment,
and conversations that stick, conversations that stand out, conversations that actually make impact. Like that is the power of design. And that's where we shift. If we're talking about group coaching and team coaching, there are layers of facilitation, but this is really like what's happening now, what's needed to be explored today in this moment, in this context of what's being said, whether it's being said explicitly or implicitly. And I'm going to take us, if you don't mind, I'm going to take us into the superpowers. This is
Yeah.
where, the presence, but those 5 superpowers, we did 5 episodes. We've done groupings of them in season 1, but starting on episode 44 right through to 48, we cover
Mm,
each of the 5 superpowers, and I think these, to me, it's actually changed who I am as a coach, as a group coach, as a facilitator, leader, trainer. These superpowers have changed how I show up and how I be with people, and the things that actually need to, like, my growth edge, the catalytic firecracker, right? And I'm going to bring some culture, and being Canadian, and being raised by immigrants. Like, I was always be respectful, be polite, all this stuff. And I'm speaking of my experience, right? So for me, being a catalytic fire, like being a little bit of provocateur or a disruptor, that was my growth edge. That is still my growth edge, right? When I came into coaching, it was around the grounded labyrinth edge, really slowing things down. But now that's my growth edge. And all of them are important, and they're
yes.
all needed.
Mm,
That's why presence is so important. We need to be present. We need to be listening. We need to be able to read the room. I even
yeah.
did this in my workshop yesterday. I said, more than the words coming out of your mouth is how you show up. It's how guests, because I'm working with the hospitality industry. I'm like, they don't care if you speak perfect English. What they care about is how you show up. If they understand that you understand them, that you open the
Yes.
door and you're calm and you're smiling. Like, it's
Yeah,
that calmness, it's
exactly.
that
It's the body
connection.
language, right?
It's the body language, it's the verbal and
More
the
than
nonverbal,
55%. It's
but
only
that,
8% what you say. 8%
yeah.
is what you actually say. It's the
And that
tone.
is the same as coaches when we're in our conversations,
Mhm.
right? And so does this participant in your group coaching program need some provocateur
Yeah.
versus the one next to her or next to him might actually need more slowness? And
Yes.
so it is that adaptability, it is that agility. And I think that really is, I'm going to say this, it's not explicit design, but it's how we show up that actually makes
Mhm.
those conversations stand out, that creates
Yeah.
that transformation beyond what we're saying, beyond
Yes.
what our script thinks we have to cover in that 75 minutes or that hour. They don't
Mhm.
care. They just want to be heard. And we need to adapt to each of those people in group. Team, it's
Yes.
different. In team, we're actually listening when we're inviting team members to speak as a team, not as an individual. Team first, then individual. And we're
Yeah.
looking for those alignment points. Where can we align?
Yeah. How do we work across differences, right? What I think, just
Totally.
like we spent a lot of time this season looking at the superpowers, which is critical for any coach, we also need to look at the different work styles for our clients. And a big shift that's happened, and I'll name it because I am Canadian, is the fact that we do embrace the uniqueness of every individual in the room. It is about harnessing the diversity of the talent in the room. And that's been a really interesting context that I think coaches south of the border have had to really navigate. But we will continue to advocate for the fact that why I developed really the superpowers framework in the first place was in reaction to the diversity and harnessing and really supporting the diversity that exists within any coaching conversation of many, because we are not all the same. And it's been really interesting to see our certification students go through our more advanced coursework, because we do continue to offer a 70-hour certification pathway. A lot of other organizations say you can get certified after 20 hours, but I will say, having created this field, 20 hours is not enough. That's going to give you a baseline, but it is not going to give you really the range of skills and
The range and the
techniques.
depth, if I can say. There's
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
depth. 20 hours, you just skim the surface. You get
Yeah.
the fundamentals, the foundations, but it's kind of like, well, how do you get it into your bones? How do you integrate it? So you can actually make that impact? Sorry, Jen, I
Yeah.
was just like, yeah.
Well, we take pride. And I've had coaches who are new to the industry saying, but you ask for too much. Well, we have set the bar. We have created the bar here at Potentials Realized. There's a lot of people who would assert that they are the expert in the realm of group coaching. I'm not going to say that they're not experts in their own right. However, the track record is not there to see what do you need beyond 5 years, beyond 10 years in an industry. And that is, this is our 20th anniversary. And there aren't many people still in the profession of coaching that have been around that long to really see not only what is needed, but the circularity. We are coming into a moment that the closest experience, and it is not even very similar, but most people are making that connection, is the economic downturn of 2008, 2009. And we were a 4 or 5 year old business at that time. I really saw group coaching taking off. A lot of people are saying group coaching is taking off in 2025. Well, yes, and not really. It's been around for 20 years. So again, when people say it's not understood, I think that begs the question to ask, well, why is it not being understood? I think it's
Yes.
very clear. And maybe there are cultures that in organizations, and I would even assert at the community level,
Mhm.
where they've been engaging with group coaching in 20 years. So that takes us to one of our latest episodes, actually the derivatives of group and team coaching, which I hope people will listen to. I think that's 51 as we
Yeah.
got to this level. So I'm just looking at my notes. I think we've actually touched on quite a bit. We've looked, the buckets this year have been tools and practices, design, presence, course AI and the future of work. And stay tuned for my next book coming out, which is Coaching for the Future of Work, looking at capacity and looking at creativity and collaboration. We've also looked at the business because we need to have thriving businesses. So I hope people will check out the Business Reset Challenge that I did last week. It's going to be an evergreen challenge, 5 days. And as Evana said, it is about getting clear on what your clients need right now. And that will continue to shift, I would assert. As someone who has worked global economics my entire life,
Mm.
there are many things on the horizon that most people are not yet thinking about. But I would say group coaching, especially, is going to be a really powerful vehicle for helping people redesign what the future might need from humanity.
Beautiful. Really beautiful. And I think in what you're saying, all these things are so important. And I think it's about staying in that conversation. I know being part of the Potentials Realized team now for 4+ years, your work has continued to evolve. And I know that sometimes I feel like I'm behind in what's evolving in the world of group and team coaching, but it is evolving and we need to be there. We need to be in that conversation, both in our sharpening our own saw based on what our participants are asking for, needing, and as well as for our own development, whether it be as coaches, whether it be as entrepreneurs, whether it be as business leaders. If you're an internal coach, it doesn't mean that you don't need to sharpen your saw, whatever that
Oh,
is.
no.
And I just want to name something because you touched on it, this whole thing around differences. And I just want to add a layer of like cultural, like that cultural
Yeah.
layer, like, that cultural communication. And I know even in our programs, even in what I'm doing in Italy, like, yes, there might be Italian, but there's German descent, there's Russian descent, there's this descent, right? Like it is. And so how can we be with those differences while also leveraging those differences as ways to help people connect with one another and have compassion, empathy in their work and in their peers? I think this is especially in how the world is right now. I think there's a layer of compassion, empathy that coaches really need to be present and listening to. I know my work is really evolving in the cross-cultural place.
Mm-hmm.
And how can we be, regardless of where we're from and where we sit, whether it be on a screen or not, really support different cultures, to come together, to be together, and to really create together.
Well, it's a skill of the future, right? We are in a fractured world. However, where does change happen? It happens when people are able to reach across and work across differences. And that is a skill set that is probably more important today than ever before. Sadly, a lot of organizations don't have that intercultural capacity. Yet it's been something we've worked with. It's been the history of my work since the early
Mhm.
1990s in economies and countries which historically have been very, very divided. Yet, if we look at where they are today, they're leading the world because they have found ways to build that capacity to work across difference. And so it's not always, and certainly not always, a welcomed skill set, but it is, I do believe it is the ability, whether we're talking culture, generations, insights, industries, wicked problems, and the problems of the future are going to require us to be able to be multidisciplinary. It's a different way of thinking. And as change happens, the status quo digs their heels in even more. I'll leave it at that. But,
Yes.
how does change happen? It happens through conversation, one person at a time, one community at a time, one industry at a time.
And we as coaches, as leaders, have a great role and opportunity to support those conversations across differences to happen. And
Yeah.
and more than ever, they're necessary. And yeah, I think, I know that's where I'm sharpening my saw. I'm more exposure, putting myself more in those circumstances because that is where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
And you said as a Canadian, and I'm like, I was born and raised in Canada. And I sometimes we underestimate, how that just gets filtered into our blood, into our DNA, like
Yeah.
how that shows up, like different from other cultures, other nations. As you said, how the South are having to really kind of catch up and adapt to some of this, where Canadians are naturally, like, I just think when I was in elementary school, Canada, cultural mosaic, the US, this was going back into the 80s. I'm aging myself, the melting pot, like it sticks. I was in grade 12. No, I was 12 in grade 6 social studies. That's what I learned in grade 6.
Coming from, Toronto, thankfully, one of the
Yeah.
most multicultural cities of the world,
Mhm.
I have to say, we have found a way, and luckily in my lifetime, found a way to really appreciate just the amazing experience of so many people who have come to the city to make it their home, but brought their culture.
Yeah.
It's not perfect, certainly not perfect, but
No.
it is. I think there's a lot to be learned, and something you said, it's just not a nice to have, it's a responsibility. All of this is a responsibility to really look at what do we as, I would say even very broadly right now, as a human
Women.
race want
Yeah,
to create. What will we tolerate? What is acceptable and
absolutely.
what is not? And as coaches, that's an interesting sort of line, as I have shared quite a bit, even on this podcast. My work is as a critical educator. That in 2026 is maybe not aligned with what my role as a coach is. And so we do, as we move through spaces to affect change, to facilitate conversations, also need to be very clear on who are we and how are we showing up, and how do we
Mm,
design what our clients need, because I don't think it's a little box, right? It's never been a little box, but as this industry has grown, we've had to be very discerning. But the reality is we move between spaces a
yeah,
lot in order
yeah.
to affect a better world.
Yeah, and if I look back at the last 10 years of my life, my professional life, like it's evolved. Like I've evolved as a human, I've evolved as a leader, and I'm more natural just because I've lived abroad for the last 10 years. I've lived in Costa Rica, I've lived in Italy, I've lived in Canada. And maybe because my Canadian roots, it's more natural to the culture, like that more accepting, that more curiosity, like using all those coaching skills, but
Mhm.
allowing all of me, because what I heard what you said, and I'll name it, is that identity. And the
All
identity of who
identity.
we see ourselves as a coach in 2020 might be different than who we are as humans, which might inform us on where our coaching, where our business has to evolve, where we need to evolve, where we need to grow. And I
Mhm.
think, and then we can bring in the layer of AI. And how does AI support that? How can it facilitate some of that, but not replace the humanness, not
Yes.
replace, right? So we can continue to bring our work, bring our impact to the world and have that ripple effect as potentials realized branding is that ripple effect.
It's been a journey. I've appreciated every one of the episodes. We've had a different rhythm every
Yeah.
time, and it's been a lot of fun. So thank you, Evana.
Thank you.
We've done 2 seasons now. We are going to take a bit of a hiatus, but hope that you will drop in and explore all the amazing episodes, whether you've been watching it, which has been a shift since we started this whole podcast, or maybe you are still listening to it in your car, on the road, on the treadmill, outside. There will no doubt be continued elements that we could be exploring. We do so much exploration in our group and team coaching certification pathways. If you are looking for, I would say a neuroscience based, experientially rich, high touch and high zone, check us out at groupcoachingessentials.ca. Our main company is Potentials Realized. That houses all the lines of business, from support for leaders and teams, support through our Conversation Sparker experiential products, and of course, our experience design work as well. So we look forward to continuing to support you with whether it's through books, the podcast, tools. It's been a blast. So final words to you, Evana. What do you want to say as we go to wrap up season 2?
Yeah, it's just, as you said, it's been a journey. And even, these various episodes, they've naturally shifted based on what's happening in the world. We've adapted. And I just invite everyone to just look at where you are, look at where you want to be, and how do you adapt and how do you pivot? And Jen, more than anything, season 2 has been a blast. This journey with this podcast has been amazing. And like you said, we're taking a small hiatus. And I've gotten to grow through you, with you. And I really hope that we've been able to do that for our listeners. And stay in touch. Let us know what you're enjoying and what can be of value.
Yeah. What do you need next?
Always
there's a next.
There's
So
always the next.
with that, until we see you, hear you, get to speak with you again, listeners, be well. And enjoy your conversations.
Ciao for now.